Hello everyone, Alistair Gold of Football.London here. Tottenham Hotspur's Premier League season has begun. As you probably saw yesterday, they beat Aston Villa 3-1 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium to begin their campaign in a decent way. Personally, while I am normally at matches and press conferences and the like, I actually had to watch the game yesterday on a bus travelling to an airport in Stockholm. My family very kindly gave me a surprise trip to Sweden for a couple of days, but I did manage to watch the game on my phone on the bus and then in the airport the second half. So I have seen what's happened and did watch it as well as you can on a mobile phone. So that's why I'm going to be able to talk about it. Obviously, in future, I'll be talking about this from the stadium, talking about things from press conferences at the training ground. So you're not going to just have this kind of rather plain background to these videos. But I mean, let's start with the big kind of thing of the day. Well, certainly the start of the day anyway, was Jan Vertonghen's absence. I've heard rumours of plenty. I've heard it was about a contract dispute, injury. Another one was that he was told he wasn't going to be in a starting 11 and threw a bit of a tantrum and wasn't happy about that and then got left out of the squad entirely. My gut kind of leans maybe more towards the latter one. I'd actually had a heads up that he and Giovanni Lo Celso weren't going to be in the squad the day before. It was kind of presumed it was an injury at that point. I think it took a little bit of a knock in the previous match against Inter Milan, just a little whack, and maybe that's something that kind of played on mine. But obviously then Pochettino yesterday and Vertonghen himself later on both said that there was no injury. We've got to remember as well with Pochettino, especially in opening day matches, he very often leaves someone quite important out or just shuffles it around. Maybe it's to prove a point, maybe it's to say you're not indispensable, maybe it's just because he feels people are at differing levels of fitness. Last season away at Newcastle, I seem to remember it was Toby Alderweireld was the one that everyone was asking questions about. And obviously everyone thought, what does that mean for his future? This year it's Jan Vertonghen. I'd be stunned if there's been any massive breakdown in relationship between Jan Vertonghen and Mauricio Pochettino. They have a really good relationship. He's one of his vice captains. Out in Shanghai, they went out for a meal. It was him, Daniel Levy, Harry Kane, Vertonghen, and some of the coaching staff. They're a close-knit bunch. I'd imagine it was maybe, again, this is just kind of an assumption that I think Vertonghen would have been told that he's not going to be in the first 11. Maybe that's with City in mind. Perhaps that didn't go down too well, which is why he wasn't on the bench, and Aurier seemed to be drafted in on the bench instead to cover both positions. But it's just something Pochettino does. We've seen it before. He's very much about the collective. It's not about individuals. Even Harry Kane, while Harry Kane's maybe the one player that gets slightly more preference in terms of when he's being asked questions about him, he will admit he is such an important player, but he still sees it as disrespectful to the collective. And I feel that this is just another one of those scenarios. I wouldn't say there's probably too much to read into it in terms of big fallouts, maybe offers coming in, things like that. But obviously we will see over the coming days. We know the foreign transfer markets stay open a little while longer. But I would be surprised if Vertonghen was on the way out, because he's very much a player that he's been quite clear in his kind of indications that he wants to stay. He says he loves the club. He said that quite a few times over pre-season and beforehand. It doesn't sound like a player looking to go out the exit door. Pochettino loves him. I'd be stunned if there's not a new deal for him in the coming weeks. I've said that before. Obviously, it's got to be the right one. Spurs, new deals for older players. It's not something that they hand out, a lot. But I would say, and Pochettino said it before, is that with Vertonghen, his physicality, his fitness, and the way he looks after himself, he's like a much younger player, and he feels that he could be playing at the top level. He said until 40, I think he told us last season. So I think that's just the case with Vertonghen. I wouldn't imagine it's anything too over the top dramatic. I think it's just literally a case of it was Vertonghen's kind of turn almost. Alderweireld's opening game of last season, didn't want to maybe do that again, and maybe Vertonghen was just slightly lower fitness level to him. Where else do we go? Let's go straight to the other main man on the day. There's two actually. There's Harry Kane, but we'll come to him later. Tanguy Ndombele, what a debut, capping it off with a lovely goal. I think ever so slightly deflected off Mings. Looks maybe it's come off his knee. but that didn't really change the course of the ball too much. If anything, maybe the ball was going arrowing even further into the bottom corner. I thought he played really well. I thought first half took him a little while to adjust to the game. Some nice little touches, but the pace of the Premier League is so different to any other league in the world, and I think he kind of took a little bit of time to get used to that. And obviously, being part of that diamond, the midfielders are kind of playing in very different positions. Sometimes you're out slightly wide, sometimes you're in the anchor role, sometimes you're floating about behind the strikers. That was mainly Lamela yesterday. And I think as soon as he came into a more central role, you really saw kind of, I'd say the best of him, but it's probably not even the best of him yet. Even Pochettino said at the end of afterwards in the press conference, you probably saw 30 to 40% of what Tanguy Ndombele can be like. But it was just exciting. It's exciting to see a player kind of driving towards the goal. He's a clever little player. There was a little dinked cross to Harry Kane that maybe the striker should have done better with. It was really good. His link-up play is fast, quick. He doesn't hesitate. He just tries to get that ball straight into the player. And I think that's what Spurs often miss, is that kind of someone that's kind of willing to take risks and not worry about what happens next. And after the goal, which itself was a lovely strike, you could just see the confidence flowing through him. Villa players couldn't get the ball off of him. He was absolutely flying. And the fact that he got just under 90 minutes in his belt, under his belt, is a big thing for him, especially with City next week, who we know he had 2 very decent games against last season. So him getting fitter, as I felt in pre-season, he didn't look too full of energy, let's put it that way. I think he really found Pochettino's pre-season training a tough ordeal. He told me that in an interview, and I think that was a big thing for him yesterday, coming through, scoring his debut, and really getting some minutes under his belt as well. Moussa Sissoko, I was really pleased with him on the whole yesterday. I felt my thing this year is when there's a 2 in midfield, I felt Sissoko might end up being the odd man out, because essentially Ndombele maybe gives you what Sissoko gives you and some end product. So I was worried for Sissoko that he might kind of find himself out on the fringes a little bit at times this season, which would seem incredible after such a fantastic season last year. But I thought he played really well. Don't get me wrong, his shooting is still absolutely abysmal. When he gets in that final third, and you can literally see the panic, absolute panic in his face of like, do I pass, do I shoot, do I cross, what am I going to do? And obviously we ended up with that shot from 6 yards out that rolled all the way for a throw-in. I still think he's got an important part to play for Tottenham this season. I don't think we'll see that midfield 3 a lot. I think when you see all the other players coming back, I don't think Pochettino will go for the 3 a lot, because it takes so many creative players out of the side. Well, an extra creative player out of the side. But I think they all seem to know each other's game. They're getting to learn each other. Ndombele obviously is a bit of a new unknown factor, but I think they're starting to get a hang of playing around him. I thought Winks, I saw some criticism of Winks after the game. I was quite surprised at that, because I thought he played really well. Especially that tackle, when he took the ball off someone, I can't remember who it was, brilliant sliding tackle, got up and shimmied past another man. I think it's going to be a really big season for Harry Winks. I think this could be the one that he kind of steps up to that next level in the Premier League and in the team and becomes like a real, one of those first names on the team sheet. And he just kept trying to recycle the ball, move it quickly, get things going. I think he would just maybe suffered slightly from a lack of kind of creativity ahead of him. And also, as we'll come to later, players maybe playing far too narrow and not giving him the space to move into or the options to pass to. Then we've got the fullbacks. Slightly differing performances for me. I thought Kyle Walker-Peters had another very good opening day performance. Obviously, he played against Newcastle and did very well. Was it 2 seasons ago in the opening day? Obviously, he's had many appearances since, but I thought he played really well. My one kind of worry with Walker-Peters is sometimes I feel he could drive to the touchline and get a cross in. He doesn't always do it. Whereas yesterday I felt he really tried to do that as much as he could. And he also kind of had an interesting role later in the game when Sissoko moved out wide, and almost Walker-Peters was playing almost as like a central midfielder role. He was so inside on the pitch that, Sissoko was very much the wide man. But he handled that really well. I thought he played well. Danny Rose, mixed game for me. With Danny Rose, you're always going to get the same thing. You're always going to get a real blood and thunder performance, throwing yourself at everything, passion, I saw some people saying on social media that they felt he looked like a player that had given up. I disagree entirely. I thought he was still throwing himself at everything. He was trying to do everything for the cause. Just my only issue with Danny Rose at times is that quality in the final third for a fullback. And don't get me wrong, Walker Peters' final product wasn't great either yesterday. It was probably his one side that let him down. But with Rose, it was just apart from one cross that Lucas Moura headed at the keeper quite early on, I just thought he got in some really good positions and didn't really take advantage of it. And then obviously we had the goal. I saw Davinson Sanchez getting a bit of flack for the goal, which I thought was harsh. He had his man who he was trying to deal with. For me, Rose is the covering defender that has to come across and get tighter to McGinn, and then lunged in right at the end, which obviously we're not in that situation ourselves, and I'm sure he thought he was winding up for a shot. But I just think as the experienced player left at the back there, he maybe didn't show that experience. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with Danny Rose over the coming weeks, if there's any bids in. I noticed Pochettino said that he's an important part of his team. I do wonder whether he and Rose have maybe had a chat and just decided, look, there wasn't the interest in you maybe you thought there was going to be. There was obviously the late Watford kind of movement, but the bid wasn't what Tottenham were looking for at all. So perhaps if he's sticking around, Sessegnon's still 3 to 4 weeks off, and I still don't think he's going to be a left back to begin with. I think that will be Davies. Davies himself is still coming back from that surgery in the summer. I think Spurs are going to need Danny Rose and getting somewhere back to the old Danny Rose that we saw in flashes last season. Be very interesting to see what happens with him. But I just think yesterday wasn't one of his greatest, but I don't think it was one of his worst. It was just the goal I felt he didn't do too well on. In terms of further up the pitch, Eric Lamela, another mixed performance for me. I thought he brings everything that Eric Lamela brings, the tenacity, the aggression, trying to push the tempo, play the ball quickly, like I was saying with Ndombele earlier. I would say maybe the one thing with him, he was just lacking slightly in quality with his final balls. There were some aimless ones that he can do so much better than. I think he was another one that maybe when people started pushing out wider and he started to take up some wider roles in the second half, I thought that stretched Villa much more. And then Spurs' second goal was all about him. It really was. Jack Grealish, ironically, a player heavily linked with Spurs and almost moved to Spurs last summer, just dallied on the ball. And Lamela doesn't need any invitation to come and take the ball away from you. Nipped in, tried to have a shot. Let's be honest, he wasn't trying to pass to Kane. Had a shot, which deflected into Kane's path, and Kane tucks it away. We'll talk about Kane in a minute. We'll come to him a bit later. We're just working our way down through the team. Lucas on the other side, I'm quite excited to see where Lucas is going to go this season. Obviously, a brand new deal, new contract till 2024. I think it added another year on top, didn't it? I think he's really starting to find his role in this team, and I think Pochettino is starting to trust him, which is a massive thing, because I didn't feel that to begin with. I felt that Lucas was a player that, not quite a luxury player, but maybe Pochettino saw more as an impact player. And I think with what you've seen from him towards the end of last season, and certainly in pre-season, really, I think he's looked terrific. Pre-season, I think he scored in the majority of the games. Obviously, playing more kind of up front. I say he's up front with Kane, but it's such a fluid system that sometimes he's withdrawing and Lamela's going further up with Kane. Sometimes even Kane's coming back. That's the way Tottenham play. Pochettino wants them to all be able to kind of play in each other's roles. Not quite total football, but from the Cruyff era. But it's that kind of idea of everyone should be comfortable wherever they are on the pitch almost. And I think he's come along. I still don't think he had the greatest game he's ever had, obviously. We remember that night in Amsterdam. But I think he's certainly just finding his role. And I think the players are learning where he's going to take the ball, where to move, create space. Just from him, for me, the big thing now, I think he's going to get more goals this season. I want more assists. I think there was one in the Premier League, if that, last season. Assists is where he's got to really kind of up his content because, quite frankly, with the pace he's got, the creativity he's got, the guile he's got, he should be setting up goals for other people. And then we have Christian Eriksen, a player who obviously was on the bench and everyone said what you'd expect them to say before the match. Oh, that must mean his head's not in it and he's off. I don't think it ever was that. I think he's always been fitness-wise behind the rest of the group. He had that minor surgery in the summer, didn't play in the first He didn't play in the first pre-season game against Juventus, and I think he came on very late against Manchester United, if I remember correctly, in Shanghai. He has been behind the group, and I think that's very much why there was probably a plan just to give him the half an hour or so. But I thought he made a difference. I thought he came on. He didn't look like a player that looks to be out of the club or on his way. I thought he had a really good free role. Pochettino, you could see him giving him lots of instructions before he came on. And I think he came on and really pulled Villa all over the place. Clever little flicks, balls, crosses. Sometimes he was on the left, sometimes on the centre or on the right. And great free kick as well he took, which was saved very, very well, actually. And he just was heavily involved. And it just gave Villa something else to think about. And all the other players on the pitch knew they had someone that could pick them out, their runs. Because that's the one thing. If you don't have Eriksen and Lo Celso, we'll see later on, but if you don't have someone that can kind of pull the strings with those clever passes, Lamela and Lucas obviously operate much further up. Lamela will provide through balls. He is quite good at that, but he didn't see too many of them yesterday. Lucas is more of a direct running type who you'd hope would get to the byline and cross the balls in. But in terms of an advanced playmaker, that is what Spurs missed. And as soon as Eriksen came on, you could see a complete kind of sea change in the mentality, I felt. I know Pochettino wanted to play that down slightly after it, but I felt that I think Eriksen was the key to kind of turning the tide of the game a bit. And Harry Kane, how can we not talk about Harry Kane? He looks so sharp over the pre-season. He looks like he's got even fitter. Anyone saw that ridiculous photo of him on the tour where his abs, his six-pack is just ridiculous. I think he takes a lot of inspiration from the kind of Ronaldo school of training, preparation, fitness. I think he's got his own chef at home who kind of creates this nutritional meals that very much will create the kind of the player we're seeing. He's ultra fit, he's ultra sharp, and yesterday's goals. I mean, first one was all about poacher's instinct, ready for the bounce, the deflection, taking it on, holding off the player, slamming the ball in the back of the net. His second goal was just classic Kane, just instinctive. That first touch with the outside of his foot just to knock it out of his path. Defender kind of kept him on his heels, and then he just arrowed that ball into the bottom right corner. That was just perfect. Obviously, the whole August curse is long gone now. We can forget about that. And the fact that he's got 2 in the opening day of the season, I think we're seeing a man who's had a good rest, got married, obviously, had a really good summer, come back refreshed, looks sharp, desperate to get that golden boot back, which obviously he hasn't had for the last couple of seasons. And I think he's a hungry Harry Kane, which is, the kind of Harry Kane that Tottenham Hotspur will absolutely thrive with. Be very interesting to see how sharp he is up against the City defence next week, because that'll be a good test for him. As with a few of the players, we're talking about the fullbacks. Walker Peters likely to probably be on the right again. That's going to be a massive one for him against the likes of Sterling, who's absolutely on fire at the moment. Probably it's a terrible shame for the Premier League because he's such a wonderful player, but Leroy Sané being out, is one player that has given Spurs issues in the past. Be interesting to see how Spurs kind of adapt without him there. That is one threat they used to struggle with. So that's going to be a really, really interesting game. But I think probably the most interesting thing for me, if you look at how Spurs played, they were patient, they broke down a side that were very much just there to defend once they'd got their goal. 24 shots on goal, I think it was 75% possession, Spurs had something like that. They managed to break them down despite having, let's go through the players. They didn't have Lo Celso, new signing, didn't have Dele Alli, obviously out injured, Son Heung-min out suspended, Ryan Sessegnon, he's going to be another 3 or 4 weeks. That's just your attacking options. If you think about the options he's now got on that bench and how strong it's going to be. Nkudu came on yesterday, late on. I presume he's still going to move on in the coming weeks, but I can't even see Nkudu getting close to that bench purely because of the depth now in those attacking midfield options. And then that's not even to talk about further back the pitch when you've got Foyth, Davies, Vertonghen obviously, Aurier, Dyer, Wanyama. This is a deep, strong side. You can see Pochettino's whole demeanour at his press conference the other day. Again, I was away, so I called it up. I watched it afterwards, and it's just a happier man than he was on pre-season. He's a manager that knows the club has spent over 100 million on signings this summer, and he knows he's now got options. And I thought it was really, really telling, a whole shift in dynamic, talking about the fact that Spurs now have to be, it would, for him personally, it wouldn't be a success if they just finished in the top four. He wants silverware. You know, how many years of kind of everyone, including the press, I'm going to lump myself into this as well, and the fans wanted him to say, we need silverware, rather than that would be great, we all aim to win things. But to actually come out and say the season wouldn't be a success if they don't win a trophy, whether that's FA Cup, Carabao Cup, Premier League or Champions League, I think that's a real sea change, and I think that shows how pleased he is with the options he's got. Obviously, he would have liked more. Paulo Dybala would have been an amazing capture if they'd managed to sort out those image rights in time. But I think he's really happy with the, 3 signings that are going to go straight into his first team squad, and obviously Jack Clarke will come along next season. But those are 3 really important kind of areas in the team. Lo Celso, the playmaker role, they needed another one to either to challenge Eriksen or replace him. Sessegnon, the pace and wide man who can also play at the back, a versatile player. And obviously on Dembele, who we saw yesterday, just kind of glimpses of what he can do, and there's so much more to come. I think it's exciting times. Obviously I saw earlier Jose Mourinho has put Spurs in as one for the title race. City, Liverpool, Spurs, and as he said, Man City's B team. And I think Spurs, that's what they've got to be looking at. I know they've got incredibly tough games coming up as well. I think the fixtures, the way they're lying, they're going to play a lot of their away games against the top 9 sides, I think it is, from last season, away from home in the first half. I'm pretty sure it's maybe only Chelsea at home, possibly. But then the flip side to that means in the second half of the season, when they're hopefully really flying, all of those teams will be played at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, other than Chelsea. So there's absolutely no reason, the way the fixtures lies, that if they can get to Christmas and keep, absolutely plugging away, that they can't be in the consideration for what's happening at the very, very top. I think what's going on at other clubs, changes, various aspects of, say, Chelsea not being able to buy players, United very much a team in transition. Liverpool obviously didn't change up their side too much. They've got that can work for you, as Spurs found. But you wonder if they can absolutely keep that ridiculously high level they did last season. Then there's City. City for me are the kind of, obviously, as Mourinho's joked about, the B team as well. They are incredibly, incredibly strong. They will, for me, will be the one to beat. But I think Spurs can really have a go of it this season. And we need to see, obviously, there's a massive caveat, and we need to see who still leaves in the next few weeks, if anyone does, in terms of the key stars. If they do, then obviously we may have to revise that, but you'd hope there's enough cover to have a proper run this season. But I thought, don't get me wrong, as a promoted team, so we can't go overboard about it yesterday, but I just thought there was enough signs about the grit that's still there. There could be a Champions League final hangover, but there clearly wasn't. They kept plugging away and they did it. City's going to be a massive test, of course, but I just thought it was, there was something there. There was stuff to hold on to and to be quite excited about, especially with the amount of players that are out. This week we have Thursday, I think, will be the press conference. Pochettino talking about Man City, and then obviously the match at the weekend. I'll be at both of those, obviously, so we'll have more videos. I'll do one from Hotspur Way and from, hopefully, the Etihad, as long as I get time after the game. But if not, we'll do it the next day like this. So here we go. Let's hope that Tottenham can kind of keep this momentum going. Other faces come back. Maybe Lo Celso may be involved at the Etihad on the bench. You'd think after a week of training. Still got Son and Foyth out. Obviously, Foyth will be out longer with his injury anyway. But I think they're not going to go there fearful, Tottenham. They know what they did last season in the Champions League. And in the Premier League, it was very close against City as well. I think there's no reason to go there in awe of anyone. They can go there though with a bit of confidence, and that would be great to see. So I shall talk to you after those press conferences and matches, and hopefully we'll have some more interesting things to discuss.